I never expected a small wooden music box, tucked away in the attic, to become the instrument of my wife's undoing. That Thursday afternoon in mid-June, Atlanta, Georgia, 2021, the kind of sticky heat that made the old oak floors groan, Emily insisted we explore the attic. I thought it would be harmless. Dusty boxes, forgotten knickknacks. But the moment she lifted a carved mahogany box from a shadowed corner, my chest tightened. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and tell us where you're listening from. The box was delicate, floral etchings curling along its edges, a brass latch tarnished with age. I barely recognized it from my childhood. It had always been there, invisible, ignored. Emily wound the key, and the first notes fell into the attic air, soft, haunting, almost painfully familiar. But there was a precision to it, a deliberate rhythm that made my skin prickle. It wasn't a random tune, it was a message. I knelt beside her, peering at the inside of the lid. Letters etched faintly along the wood, THIRD DRAWER. My pulse thumped. Not decoration, not nostalgia, direction. Beneath the box, half hidden under a moth-eaten scarf, lay a receipt, $2,800, March 15th, 2021, a boutique purchase I'd never noticed. My mind flipped through old memories, locked drawers I'd assumed were trivial, half-burned letters I'd thought were discarded, unopened bills and folders labeled MISC. All small signals I had dismissed. All deliberate. Daddy, what does it say? Emily's voice was curious, soft, unaware of the weight behind those letters. I swallowed. It's a puzzle, honey. Only for now, it's our little secret. I decided she would help, but carefully. Her curiosity was a tool, but her safety was paramount. We spent the next hour decoding. I jotted notes, mapped the melody, aligned each note to letters on the lid. They formed short phrases, clear instructions. Third drawer checked cautiously. My chest tightened further. This wasn't just about money, it was control, secrecy, a shadow of manipulation I hadn't fully grasped. I remembered the partially burned letters from early 2021, the ones I had thought were trivial remnants of her filing habits. Now they made sense, early breadcrumbs in a path only she had intended me to miss. And the receipts, small, precise, almost casual, but enough to hint at $1,200, $3,200, transfers that had quietly slipped past me. Emily touched the receipt. Is this money? Yes, I said quietly, but we need to be careful. I didn't want to frighten her. She was a bright, curious girl, and I needed her sharpness, but not her fear. I cataloged the attic discoveries alongside mental notes of our finances. Every anomaly now hinted at intent. A boutique receipt in March, a bank transfer in April, a withdrawal in May, patterns emerging, deliberate, subtle, terrifying. My wife had woven a lattice of hidden debts. Perhaps more, each piece was minor in isolation, but collectively devastating. The room smelled of dust and cedar, but beneath that was the scent of hidden truths. I traced the melody again, aligning it with letters and numbers, handwriting them meticulously on a notebook I kept for work. Emily leaned over my shoulder, asking occasional questions. I reassured her with small smiles, framing it as detective work. We're just solving a puzzle, I said. She nodded, eyes bright, unaware that the puzzle could unravel our entire family. As evening fell, I recalled the half-burned letter once in the fireplace, edges curling and blackened. I had dismissed it as inconsequential. Now I realized it likely held early instructions, a covert warning. Every locked drawer, unopened bill, hidden receipt had been a carefully laid step, expecting me to overlook them. She had underestimated me, but she had misjudged my instinct to protect Emily. I sipped coffee at the kitchen table, music box on one side, notebook on the other, tracing the tune again. Atlanta's summer heat pressed against the windows. Shadows stretched across the table, flickering like whispers of the secrets hidden in the house. Every note, every letter, every dollar had to be accounted for. I couldn't let anxiety drive me. Precision was the only weapon I had. By the time Emily went to bed, I had a rough decoding, third drawer check cautiously. Not yet confrontation, not yet exposure, Observation, documentation, understanding, that was the strategy. The music box was no longer just a toy. It was a warning, a key, a signal of everything hidden beneath the polished surface of our home. I paused, listening to the faint echo of its tune, and whispered to myself, every note, every letter, every receipt, they center pieces. And I will follow the trail, protect Emily, and uncover the truth. This house, our savings, her trust, all are at stake, and I won't let any of it slip away. The game had begun, and this time I would play to win. I hadn't slept properly in days. Every creak of the house, every whisper from the vents felt amplified. It was late June 2021, Atlanta, and the summer heat pressed against the windows, sticky and oppressive, keeping me from fully relaxing. Emily had gone to school, and I was alone in the study, sifting through our recent bank statements. Each line of numbers, each transfer, made my chest tighten like a vice. I noticed it first in the smallest increments. A $1,200 transfer on April 9th, 2021, listed as miscellaneous. Then $2,000 on April 28th, slightly mislabeled in her handwriting on our shared ledger. And finally, $3,200 on May 14th, routed to a bank I'd never seen before. My stomach dropped. Patterns don't lie, and these numbers were anything but accidental. Someone had deliberately hidden them. Emily's innocence was a fragile thing, and I couldn't let her see the panic that was clawing at me. Yet I could feel the betrayal gnawing at my core. I thought of all the times I'd trusted her. Our conversations about bills, our late-night planning sessions for college funds, even casual remarks about splurging a little on luxuries. All of it now felt tainted, every memory shadowed by doubt. The oven timer dinged upstairs as Emily's mother prepped lunch. I jumped slightly, the sound reverberating through my tense nerves. Then came the mail slot clatter, a stack of unopened letters, some marked urgent. One in particular caught my eye, a partially hidden statement from the boutique she had frequented in March. I slipped the $2,800 receipt from the attic next to it, aligning the dates: March 15th, April 9th, April 28th, May 14th. The puzzle pieces were falling into place. Emily poked her head into the study, cheerful and oblivious. "Daddy, why is Mom hiding money?" The words hit me harder than the numbers on the page. I paused, forcing calm into my voice. "She's not hiding it, sweetheart. Some things adults manage carefully," I said, tucking the statements into a folder. I needed her to stay protected, yet her innocent observation reminded me of how deeply this betrayal had seeped into our lives. I began reconstructing her behavior over the previous months. Late phone calls she insisted were work-related. Locked drawers she always claimed contained personal items, and small, almost imperceptible omissions in conversation. Each now looked like a deliberate attempt to obscure her actions. Even family photos started feeling different. Her smile in some calculated, her hand gestures slightly tense. I decided to document everything. A ledger of deceit, as I called it in my notes. Dates, amounts, bank names, receipts, overheard conversations. Everything. I couldn't afford mistakes. One minor oversight could unravel my ability to protect Emily or confirm the truth. During one particularly tense night, I overheard her on the phone, her voice hushed, almost frantic. "Yes, I handled it just like we said. Don't worry, he won't notice until it's too late." I froze, the line went dead, leaving only the hum of the ceiling fan. My heart pounded. This wasn't just about mismanaged funds, it was calculated. She had orchestrated these transfers step by step, thinking she was invisible. By late July, I had created a visual map of the money, arrows from our account to hers, then to unknown entities. Subtle details emerged too. An accidental voicemail I retrieved from her phone included a casual remark: "Don't forget the boutique stash just until next month." Even that phrase, casual as it seemed, now read as a coded acknowledgement of her manipulations. Each day blurred into the next, a mix of meticulous observation and sleepless nights. I kept Emily engaged with small projects. Her schoolwork, puzzles, art. I couldn't let her anxiety mirror mine. And yet every question she asked chipped away at my resolve. "Daddy, why are receipts so secret?" She wondered aloud one evening, brushing her hair back as we sat on the porch. I smiled, forcing warmth. Some things we adults just need to organize carefully, honey. Sleep deprivation made shadows longer, sound sharper, every clink of silverware at dinner. Every faint whisper from the kitchen made me jump. I traced my finger along the receipt lines again and again, confirming dates, amounts, and locations. Each anomaly was deliberate: the $1,200 on April 9th, $2,000 on April 28th, $3,200 on May 14th. Gaps matching boutique visits, transfers, and subtle purchases I had never been told about. I couldn't ignore the emotional toll. The woman I had married, the mother of my child, was systematically betraying me, and by extension Emily. I questioned my judgment. Had I missed prior warnings, ignored signals because I wanted to believe and trust? Doubt pressed against me as heavily as the Atlanta heat, making each decision feel perilous. By mid-August 2021, I had a careful record: transactions, partial receipts, subtle discrepancies in her social calendar, overheard calls, and the music box code. I kept everything filed meticulously. Emily remained partially shielded, though her innocent nudges occasionally brought new details to light. One night I found myself in the living room, coffee cooling beside me, listening to the faint buzz of the refrigerator, staring at the scattered receipts and ledgers. I realized the betrayal had become a palpable force, wrapping itself around our family's stability. Yet, beneath fear, a thread of determination strengthened. I wouldn't react hastily. I wouldn't confront blindly. I would collect evidence, document, and plan with precision. The tension didn't release until Emily fell asleep, her soft breathing reminding me of what truly mattered. My focus sharpened: protect her, verify everything, uncover the truth, and prepare for the moment when calculated exposure would be both ethical and absolute. I leaned back, letting my eyes drift to the ceiling, tracing the pattern of shadows cast by the ceiling fan. In those shadows, I saw the stakes clearly: financial ruin, emotional betrayal, and a child's trust hanging in the balance. And I swore silently every step I took would be deliberate, every move lawful, every revelation carefully orchestrated. She might think she had the advantage, but I had patience, observation, and an unwavering need to restore justice. The house was silent, save for the hum of the city outside. The ledgers sat open, receipts aligned like dominoes ready to fall. And I knew that once the dominoes started moving, everything she had hidden would be revealed, not recklessly, but ethically, strategically, and inevitably. The game was no longer just discovery. It was preparation, mapping, and readiness. And by the time Emily awoke in the morning, she would remain shielded from the storm brewing silently around her. But I would be ready. I had to be. By early September 2021, Atlanta had settled into that sticky late summer haze, the kind that made evenings feel heavy and endless. Emily was back from school, her curiosity sharpened by the small victories in our decoding of the music box. I had begun cataloging every single clue: receipts, half-burned letters, the notes etched into the music box lid. Each detail was deliberate, every omission calculated. I realized then that my wife's silence was not carelessness. It was a code waiting to be cracked. I spread the evidence across my study desk, a careful mosaic of numbers, letters, and dates. Receipts lined up chronologically: $2,800 on March 15th, $1,200 on April 9th, $2,000 on April 28th, $3,200 on May 14th, and smaller boutique purchases I had barely noticed. On top of them, I placed notes from the music box, patterns of letters corresponding to locations, drawers, and even phrases like "check cautiously." Emily peered over my shoulder, her small fingers pointing to sequences I had already marked. "Daddy, could it be like a secret map?" she asked, her eyes wide. "Yes, honey, that's exactly what it is," I whispered, "but we have to be careful, only small steps at a time." Her presence was comforting yet nerve-wracking. Every innocent observation she made reminded me of the stakes: our family home, Emily's trust, and the financial foundation we had painstakingly built. I couldn't make mistakes. Every decision had to be precise, lawful, and strategic. I began connecting the dots beyond the obvious duplicate keys, overlooked safe deposits, subtle remarks she had made over months. For instance, a casual voicemail from late July hinted at a hidden account in a local credit union. Another offhand comment in late June mentioned a meeting after the boutique, which combined with the March 15th receipt formed a timeline of deliberate financial concealment. Each clue reinforced the same disturbing truth: she had been operating in silence, confident I wouldn't notice. To verify, I enlisted a trusted friend, discreet and reliable, to assist with observation. Together we traced patterns in her movements, without raising suspicion. It was delicate work, watching from a distance, noting times, verifying dates. Every small slip she made, forgetting to lock a drawer properly, leaving a receipt partially visible, was recorded meticulously. The private investigator I had hired confirmed my suspicions: hidden accounts, unexplained transfers, and minor personal secrets that could have snowballed into larger betrayals. It became increasingly clear that her motives were layered: mounting debts, an affair hidden in plain sight, and social pressures she felt desperate to control. Each revelation was grounded in fact, supported by verifiable evidence. One afternoon, Emily discovered another small piece: a partially burned letter wedged behind a bookshelf. Together we carefully pieced it together, revealing the first lines of a coded message, which aligned perfectly with the music box's melody. The thrill of discovery was bittersweet. This was my daughter uncovering her mother's deception, step by step, while I balanced protection and revelation. I began mapping everything digitally: dates, amounts, letters, and locations. The music box became a key to decoding behavior patterns. Every note corresponded to a drawer, an envelope, or a minor financial irregularity. It was painstaking, but every hour spent felt necessary. Emily, though young, was a surprisingly attentive partner, often noticing patterns I overlooked. Her observations were age-appropriate yet invaluable. Late one evening, I overheard her mother muttering on the phone, voice low, almost frantic. "Yes, everything is set. He hasn't noticed yet. Make sure it stays that way." The casual tone masked the tension beneath. I scribbled notes, recording time and phrases, but remained careful. The evidence was building, piece by piece, beyond doubt. By mid-September, I had a nearly complete decoding of the music box and related financial anomalies. Duplicate keys, hidden safes, partially visible letters, all pointed to calculated concealment. Each discovery reinforced a singular truth: her silence had been a tool, a calculated method of control, and I now had the means to understand it fully. I reflected on my own misjudgments. Had I ignored earlier signals out of comfort, habit, or disbelief? Those questions lingered as I watched Emily sketch patterns in her notebook, mirroring the sequences we had uncovered. My responsibility was not only to protect her, but also to ensure that when the time came, the revelation would be handled ethically and safely. The plan began to take shape in my mind. I would not confront recklessly. I would not act without law or order. Each discovery, each note, each verified receipt was a building block for ethical exposure. The music box, initially a nostalgic curiosity, had become a precise instrument of understanding, and ultimately justice. That night, as Emily slept, I revisited the ledger one last time: March 15th, April 9th, April 28th, May 14th, the boutique receipt trail, coded notes, and partial letters. Every detail aligned with the music box. Every anomaly accounted for. The path was clear: observe, document, plan, and protect. She might think her silence was impenetrable, but the combination of careful attention, logical decoding, and patient documentation had turned the tables. I switched off the study lamp and listened to the faint echo of the music box, still wound and waiting on the shelf. Its notes, once a gentle melody, now resonated as a roadmap, a coded testimony of deceit, a warning, and a guide. And I knew, as the Atlanta night pressed against the windows, that our next moves would be deliberate, strategic, and entirely within the bounds of law and ethics. The silence was no longer empty. It was a code I had cracked, a betrayal I now understood, and a puzzle whose pieces were firmly in my hands. The ethical, patient unraveling of her secrecy had begun. Every calculated step I took from here on would ensure that Emily's trust remained intact, the family's safety preserved, and the eventual revelation both precise and justified. By late September 2021, Atlanta's summer haze had started to wane, the evenings tinged with early hints of fall. Emily was back at school, but my attention never wavered. Every line of the ledger, every receipt, and every faintly scribbled note was a puzzle piece in the web of deception my wife had spun. I had begun tracing transactions meticulously, verifying bank statements and noting anomalies in handwriting, dates, and amounts. It started small, a $450 boutique receipt from April 2nd, 2021, slipped into a folder in the study. I let it sit in plain sight while casually observing her. She didn't notice my deliberate placement, yet her subtle reactions were telling. A slight hesitation in her gestures, a micro-expression, a flicker of concern when she glanced at the folder. These were confirmations, not assumptions. Every casual act became data. A voicemail accidentally left on her phone captured her whispering about a quick transfer before he notices. The words were casual, almost innocent to anyone else. To me, they were incriminating, each syllable confirming a pattern of deliberate concealment. My heart pounded, but my mind remained calm. The thrill of uncovering truth, tempered by the responsibility to protect Emily, sharpened my focus. I decided to test reactions subtly. One morning, I dropped the $450 receipt on the kitchen counter, pretending to glance at it. Her eyes flicked to it instantly, a barely perceptible tightening of her lips. She recovered quickly, but I had my confirmation. Every minor slip she made, every accidental reveal, fed the ledger I kept. I also traced her communications. A casual email from early June referenced an afternoon meeting after boutique errands. Another from July contained vague details about an unknown account she had been managing. Each piece added layers to the story, a clear trajectory of hidden financial activity. Emily became my quiet assistant again, unaware of the gravity of what she was helping to uncover. She noticed inconsistencies innocently. "Daddy, why does Mom sometimes forget receipts?" Her observations, phrased as innocent questions, nudged me to investigate further. Every detail, no matter how small, could be a linchpin in understanding her motives. I cross-referenced each receipt and note with the music box code. The tune, once merely a curious melody, now mapped perfectly onto locations and document types. Drawer sequences, letter fragments, and hidden receipts aligned with the melody's notes. It was methodical, precise, and chillingly effective. The level of calculation my wife had applied to her silence became increasingly evident. One evening, as rain drizzled lightly against the windows, I reviewed our family ledger. $1,200 transfer on April 9th, $2,000 on April 28th, $3,200 on May 14th, $450 on April 2nd. Every number now told a story. Patterns of concealment emerged: boutique purchases, account transfers, and coded letters, all interconnected. I realized she had been confident that her small, deliberate manipulations would remain invisible, but meticulous observation had rendered her invisible safety net ineffective. I also consulted the family lawyer discreetly, sharing only what was necessary to ensure legality. The advice was precise: document everything. Avoid confrontation, maintain Emily's safety, and preserve evidence for eventual exposure. Every action had to be lawful. Every revelation had to be airtight. I was determined not to let impulse ruin months of careful observation. By late September, I had mapped out her network of hidden accounts, minor financial manipulations, and coded correspondence. The picture was complete. Debts, clandestine transfers, and social pressures had driven her actions, yet all were deliberate. My strategy became clear. I would use observation, subtle testing, and careful documentation to build an undeniable narrative. Every night after Emily fell asleep, I revisited the scattered receipts and notes. The music box sat on the desk, its faint melody echoing softly in the quiet study. It was more than a toy. It was the key to understanding her silence, her hidden moves, and her calculated avoidance of detection. In those long nights, I also reflected on my own misjudgments. Had I been too trusting, too distracted by daily life to notice the subtle patterns? These questions pressed against me like Atlanta's summer humidity, heavy and unavoidable, but I could not dwell on the past mistakes. I had to focus on what lay ahead, verifying evidence, planning strategic exposure, and protecting Emily at all costs. By the end of Act 4, I had created a full evidence matrix: receipts, music box notes, letters, transfers, and behavioral observations. Everything aligned. The picture of her silence and manipulation was coherent, legally sound, and emotionally devastating. And through it all, Emily's safety and innocence remained intact, shielded by my careful orchestration. The game was no longer reactive. It was calculated, deliberate, and ethical. Every subtle test, every documented slip, and every cross-referenced note brought me closer to eventual confrontation, not in anger, but in truth. I finally allowed myself a breath, leaning back in the chair as shadows stretched across the study walls. The rain pattered against the windows, a quiet rhythm echoing the methodical process I had built. My resolve hardened, every line on paper, every silent observation, every coded note would culminate in exposure, but only when it could be executed precisely, lawfully, and with full protection for Emily. The silence in the house was no longer empty. It was charged with anticipation, and I knew, as the night pressed on, that my careful unraveling of lies was on the cusp of moving from observation to action. By early October 2021, Atlanta's evenings had cooled slightly, the oppressive summer humidity giving way to a soft, crisp air. I had spent weeks meticulously documenting my wife's hidden activities: receipts, bank statements, partial letters, music box codes, and subtle behavioral clues. The picture was clear now, yet I knew that patience was essential. Acting too soon could jeopardize Emily's trust, the integrity of the evidence, and my ability to restore justice. I began controlled exposures, small strategic tests designed to provoke subtle reactions without tipping my hand. One morning, I left a $8,200 transfer notice conspicuously on the kitchen counter, wrapped in a folder marked MISC. She paused, eyes flicking toward it, lips pressing into a thin line. Noticing her hesitation, I remained neutral, sipping coffee as if I hadn't seen anything. That tiny micro-expression was confirmation. She was anxious but carefully masking it. Emily, ever observant, pointed out inconsistencies innocently. Daddy, Mom forgot to lock that drawer again. I used the moment to retrieve the partially burned letters from the fireplace and align them with the music box notes. Each tiny slip was like a puzzle piece snapping into place. The scale of deception was breathtaking: boutique purchases, hidden transfers, coded letters, and secret accounts. I also began tracking her small social missteps: casual remarks to friends, overlooked receipts, and moments of carelessness, all documented. Each minor exposure was planned, discreet, and lawful. I never overstepped boundaries. Each test was designed to confirm facts, not to intimidate. My goal was clarity, not cruelty. The private investigator I had employed confirmed additional details: a small hidden safe in her dressing room, a duplicate key I had never seen, and a partial list of accounts with minimal deposits meant to avoid detection. Every finding reinforced a single truth: she had been confident in her secrecy, but my methodical observation was now rendering her control ineffective. One evening, as the Atlanta sun dipped behind rooftops, I noticed a faint voicemail on her phone, accidentally left on the speaker. Her voice, low and hurried: "Make sure the meeting stays private. He hasn't noticed yet." The casual tone belied the tension beneath. I replayed it several times, noting the time and date: October 4th, 2021, 6:17 p.m. Each small slip was another thread to weave into the narrative of truth. Emily remained a quiet partner in the process. Her curiosity harnessed carefully. She observed patterns, asked gentle questions, and sometimes pointed out details I had missed, like a misfiled receipt or a drawer left slightly ajar. Her presence reminded me of the stakes, protecting her innocence while navigating the emotional minefield of betrayal. By mid-October, I had plotted a sequence of minor revelations. Each would be revealed in a controlled, predictable manner: subtle hints dropped in conversation, carefully misplaced receipts, and documents arranged to elicit small reactions. Every step was calculated to maintain lawfulness and ensure Emily's safety. One night, I sat in the study, listening to the faint hum of the ceiling fan and the occasional car passing by. I reviewed all evidence. Boutique receipts. $2,800, March 15. $450, April 2, $1,200, April 9, $2,000, April 28, $3,200. Hidden accounts and duplicate keys. Partial letters and music box codes. Behavioral observations, subtle social missteps. Each piece aligned with a sequence of controlled exposures I had designed. I allowed myself a small sense of satisfaction. Finally, months of observation, patience, and careful documentation were producing a strategy capable of ethical, precise exposure. I also took precautions. All documents stored securely, copies hidden, and Emily's access carefully limited to age-appropriate involvement. She was learning problem solving and observation, not the weight of deceit or financial manipulation. I reminded myself constantly the goal was justice, not vengeance. By the end of October, the cumulative effect of these exposures was visible. Micro-expressions, subtle hesitations, and small verbal slips confirmed that my wife's confidence was eroding. Yet she remained composed enough to avoid outright confrontation. I knew that the moment for full revelation, the holiday dinner, would require careful orchestration, a convergence of timing, evidence, and emotional control. As the house settled into night, rain pattering lightly against the windows, I reviewed the evidence matrix once more. Each controlled exposure had served its purpose. Reactions confirmed, patterns verified, and anomalies catalogued. The map of deception was now complete, the path forward clear. I paused, listening to the faint echo of the music box in the study. Its notes, once a playful tune, now resonated as a roadmap of truth. Each careful test, each minor exposure, had been a rehearsal preparing the stage for the moment when everything hidden would be revealed ethically, completely, and definitively. The game was no longer merely discovery. It was strategic, lawful, and inevitable. Every step I had taken, every subtle nudge and observation, had positioned me for the ultimate confrontation. And when the time came, Emily's trust would remain intact. Justice would be precise, and the deception finally unmasked. By late October 2021, Atlanta's evenings carried a crisp edge, signaling the slow approach of fall. Emily's school schedule gave me hours alone in the house, but I never truly felt alone. Every sound, the hum of the refrigerator, the subtle creak of the floors, the faint wind brushing against the windows felt magnified. My wife's movements had become patterns to observe, her subtle missteps the breadcrumbs I needed to trace her silence fully. I spent mornings quietly cataloging every slip, receipts partially visible, drawers left ajar, misplaced keys, small phrases caught in accidental voicemails. Each event was logged meticulously in my notebook. $2,800 boutique receipt, March 15th. $1,200 transfer, April 9th. $2,000 transfer, April 28th. $3,200 transfer, May 14th. $450 boutique receipt, April 2nd. Each number, each date, each note was a piece of a growing mosaic. The music box had become a blueprint, guiding me to hidden documents and locations, linking her silence to tangible evidence. Emily remained a careful observer, though she didn't yet understand the full weight of our task. Her innocent questions nudged me toward overlooked details. "Daddy, why is this drawer sticky?" Or "Mom left this paper on the counter again." I allowed her to be part of the investigation subtly, ensuring she remained engaged yet protected. Her presence reminded me daily why I could not afford mistakes. One afternoon, I intercepted a voicemail she accidentally left on speaker. Her voice, urgent yet hushed: "Everything must remain in place. He's paying attention more than I expected." I paused, noting October 22nd, 2021, 3:47 p.m. Every slip, every half-concealed document reinforced my growing understanding. She was anxious, and my strategy of controlled exposure was working. I began cross-referencing minor details with larger evidence. Duplicate keys, hidden safes, partially burned letters, and small unexplained transfers all aligned with the coded music box instructions. I realized her silence was layered: financial concealment, social reputation management, and personal control. Each layer had been designed to maintain invisibility. I now had the clarity to decode it completely. Even ordinary household sounds became part of the observation. The click of a locked drawer, the soft rustle of paper, a faint cough, all recorded mentally and logged. Each night, I reviewed these observations against the ledger of transactions and the music box code, noting anomalies, micro-expressions, and timing. Emily sometimes watched silently as I organized receipts, letters, and coded notes. I explained tasks in the guise of games, arranging patterns, identifying sequences, noting details. She was engaged but unaware of the gravity of the findings. It was delicate work teaching her problem solving without exposing her to the full betrayal, protecting innocence while gathering critical evidence. By October 28th, 2021, patterns of behavior had crystallized. I could predict her movements, where she would place documents, which drawers she would access, which accounts she would touch. This predictive observation allowed me to plan precise, lawful steps for eventual exposure. Controlled tests, minor slips, and accidental reveals all reinforced the web of evidence, readying the stage for the eventual confrontation. I coordinated with the family lawyer and my trusted friend, ensuring each observation remained documented, legal, and ethically gathered. Nothing was left to chance. Evidence, timing, and procedural integrity were paramount. Emily's safety remained the guiding principle. Every night I reviewed the music box code, aligned it with recent observations, and confirmed that the cumulative evidence was airtight. The house, quiet under the faint hum of night, became my theater of preparation. Shadows stretched across the walls as I mapped the final layers. Receipts, letters, voicemails, bank statements, and behavioral observations. Each detail was a note in the symphony of truth I was orchestrating. Finally, I allowed a brief moment of reflection. Months of careful observation, controlled exposure, and strategic patience had brought clarity. Every micro-expression, accidental voicemail, and misaligned receipt had been accounted for. The betrayal was now fully decoded, the ethical path forward defined. Emily slept peacefully, unaware that the delicate lattice of deception was being dismantled around her. I sat in the study, the faint melody of the music box echoing softly, a reminder that patience and meticulous observation had transformed suspicion into certainty. The next steps, culminating in the holiday dinner reveal, would be executed precisely, ethically, and with complete protection for her innocence. The game was no longer reactive. Every step I observed, every detail documented, had positioned me for an inevitable, lawful, and justified confrontation. And when the time came, the truth would unfold in its full measure, the music box's coded melody finally complete in its revelation. It was December 24th, 2021, Atlanta. Snow had fallen lightly overnight, dusting the streets and rooftops in a delicate white layer, a rare but perfect setting for what was to come. The living room smelled of pine, cinnamon, and roasted turkey. The table was set meticulously, silverware gleaming, crystal glasses aligned, candles flickering softly. Every detail was deliberate. This wasn't a normal family dinner, it was the stage for the truth. Emily had been unusually excited, clutching the music box in her small hands, her eyes sparkling. "Daddy, can we show them the song tonight?" she asked, unaware of the weight her question carried. I nodded subtly, keeping my composure. She would play her part perfectly. My wife entered the room, her usual composed smile in place, but I noticed a subtle tension in her shoulders, a micro-expression I had cataloged in the past weeks. The controlled exposures had worked. She was uneasy, and I knew precisely why. She didn't know the depth of the evidence I had gathered. Receipts, partial letters, hidden accounts, duplicate keys, and the coded music box messages. Dinner began with polite conversation, laughter masking underlying tension. Emily positioned herself subtly between us. Music box in hand, I had arranged the final evidence around her, neatly placed receipts, letters, and statements, some partially visible, others deliberately propped in folders marked Family Archive. Every item was intentional, designed to be noticed, yet not immediately accused. As Emily wound the music box, The familiar haunting melody filled the room. My wife glanced at her, then at the surrounding documents. Her composure flickered. One candle flickered in the draft, casting elongated shadows that danced across the table, heightening the tension. Emily, following my subtle cues, began decoding aloud, "Third drawer, check cautiously." She paused, glancing at me for confirmation. I gave the slightest nod. My wife's hands tightened around her fork, her lips pressed thin. I allowed the moment to stretch, the melody echoing, the soft clink of silverware, the subtle hiss of the fireplace punctuating the suspense. Then I spoke calmly, deliberately, first to Emily, then to the room. Emily found something in the attic, something that leads to hidden financial activity and letters we never saw before. Her mother Sip's eyes widened slightly, a flicker of panic I had anticipated. I continued, voice steady. Receipts from March, April, and May. $2,800, $1,200, $2,000, $3,200, and $450. Hidden accounts, duplicate keys, and letters, all part of a code we finally decoded. Emily helped me uncover the patterns. The room fell silent. Only the music box played, the melody now echoing like a metronome against the tension. I noticed my wife's hand trembling ever so slightly, a wine glass quivering as she reached for it. Every micro-expression I had catalogued over weeks was laid bare in this moment. I displayed the evidence subtly, receipts aligned, letters partially unfolded, music box notes visible. "Everything aligns," I said quietly. "Each number, each note, each document confirms the patterns we observed. This isn't set accusation. It sets truth." Guests seated at the dinner table shifted uneasily. The candlelight flickered against the glass, casting moving shadows on my wife Sip's face. She tried to speak, her voice trembling. I, I can explain." I nodded calmly. "You will when necessary. But first the facts speak for themselves." Emily played the final segment of the music box. Letters clearly visible, each note corresponding to documented receipts and statements. I noticed the slight shake in my wife's hands again, her carefully maintained composure cracking layer by layer. The culmination of weeks of observation, controlled exposures, and careful documentation had reached its apex. Every slip, every partial letter, every unnoticed receipt had converged into a lawful ethical revelation. There was no shouting, no anger, only truth laid bare with precision. I watched as understanding dawned in the eyes of everyone present. Guests murmured quietly, absorbing the evidence. My wife's gaze shifted from Emily to the documents, to me and back again. She realized the inevitability of exposure had arrived, not as a surprise, but as the logical conclusion of months of careful observation. I concluded gently, my voice carrying authority without malice. Every note, every letter, every receipt, they were pieces of a puzzle. The puzzle is now complete. Justice is not revenge, it is clarity, truth, and protection for those who matter most. Emily smiled, unaware of the tension she had helped reveal. My wife lowered her gaze, silent, powerless to contest the meticulously documented truth. The music box's final notes lingered in the air, a soft, haunting cadence marking the end of secrecy. That night, as snow drifted against the windows, I reflected quietly. The evidence had spoken. Ethics had guided each step, and Emily's trust remained intact. Her innocence preserved, the game had reached its conclusion. The melody played fully, and justice, precise, lawful, and inevitable, had been achieved. By early January 2022, the snow had long melted from Atlanta's streets, leaving crisp winter air that hinted at new beginnings. The holiday dinner had passed, the revelation had settled like dust, and yet the ripples of that night continued to spread through our home. Emily moved through the house with a newfound confidence, her trust in me reinforced. She didn't need to understand all the details, only that the truth had been protected carefully and ethically. I spent the first quiet mornings of the new year reviewing every ledger, every note, every coded message once more. $2,800 March 15th. $1,200 April 9th, $2,000 April 28th, $3,200 May 14th, $450 April 2nd, each transaction now marked as resolved, documented, and reconciled. The music box sat on my desk, its faint melody echoing softly in the study, a symbol of both discovery and closure. Emily noticed the calm. "Daddy, it feels like everything is okay now," she said, one morning, her small hands tracing the familiar patterns of letters on the music box lid. I smiled, resting my hand gently over hers. "It is, Emily, because truth has a way of protecting those who matter most." I reached out to the family lawyer to finalize document filing, bank reconciliations, and legal safeguards. Every transaction that had been hidden was now accounted for, every receipt archived. Safes had been secured, duplicate keys logged, and letters carefully stored. There was a sense of order restored, a closure that had been absent for months. Even my wife, though still silent at times, began to navigate our home differently. The tension that had defined every movement, every glance, gradually gave way to cautious cooperation. Her composure was intact, but the aura of certainty she had once relied upon was gone. Small acts, a properly locked drawer, careful attention to receipts, reflected a subtle acknowledgement of accountability. Emily remained my constant anchor. I included her in simple decisions now: which documents to file, which ledgers to review, always age appropriate, always maintaining innocence while teaching responsibility. The music box had become more than a puzzle. It was a tool for education, trust, and patience. I also reflected on my own actions. Months of observation, controlled exposures, and meticulous documentation had been exhausting, emotionally taxing, and sometimes isolating. Yet every careful step had preserved Emily's trust and ensured ethical, lawful outcomes. The ripple effect extended beyond finances. It had restored moral clarity to our household, reinforcing boundaries and accountability. One evening, as the last light of day filtered through the blinds, I reviewed a handwritten note from the family lawyer, confirmation that all accounts were reconciled, all legal steps documented, and every exposure fully traceable. It was satisfying, not vindictive. Justice had been precise, measured, and complete. I paused, listening to the faint echo of the music box once more. Its melody, now associated with resolution rather than suspense, played softly in my mind. The house felt lighter, the air clearer, as if the tension that had lingered for months had finally dissipated. Emily, curled up with a book near the fireplace, glanced at me. "Daddy, can we play the song again?" she asked. I nodded, allowing the notes to fill the room, each one a reminder that patience, observation, and careful planning had brought clarity. The storm of betrayal had passed. What remained were the ripples of restored trust, ethical justice, and emotional equilibrium. Every receipt, every letter, every coded note had been accounted for. Every subtle slip had been observed, every exposure controlled, and through it all, Emily's innocence had been preserved, her trust fortified. As I watched her smile, I realized the true value of measured justice: not cruelty, not punishment, but restoration. The music box's melody lingered, gentle and reassuring, a soft reminder that truth, when pursued patiently and ethically, creates stability and security where chaos once reigned. The ripples would continue, lessons reinforced, boundaries respected, and trust rebuilt. And in those quiet moments, I understood that the story of betrayal and careful revelation had completed its first full arc. By late January 2022, Atlanta's winter had settled into a steady rhythm. The holidays were behind us, but the consequences of the prior month's discoveries were unfolding quietly, deliberately. I had spent weeks ensuring that every action taken, every piece of evidence documented, was legally sound, ethically justified, and fully verifiable. This was not vengeance. It was measured justice. I met with the family lawyer one morning, the office warm, the faint hum of city traffic drifting through the open window. She laid out the final steps: formal notices, reconciled accounts, and documented proof of every transfer, receipt, and hidden letter. Each document was precise, time-stamped, and aligned with my cataloged observations. $2,800, March 15th. $1,200, April 9th. $2,000, April 28th. $3,200, May 14th. $450, April 2nd. All reconciled, all traceable. Emily sat nearby, quietly coloring, unaware of the legal intricacies unfolding. Her presence reminded me that the stakes were never abstract. They were personal. My daughter's trust had to remain intact. Her innocence shielded, even as accountability was enforced. Every decision, every move was guided by that principle. I also arranged discreet consultations with the bank, ensuring that hidden accounts were frozen and reconciled. Duplicate keys were logged, safes accounted for, and minor discrepancies corrected. Each step confirmed the truth without public spectacle. Justice, I reminded myself, need not be dramatic to be complete. My wife watched these processes unfold with a careful composure, her confidence tempered by awareness of the meticulous documentation. There were no public confrontations, no accusations shouted across rooms, only the quiet certainty that the truth, measured and undeniable, was now structured against her manipulations. One afternoon, I walked Emily through simple lessons in observation and ethics, using the music box as a tool. "See, Emily," I said gently. "Every note, every pattern tells a story, and stories are only meaningful when we treat them honestly and carefully." She nodded, wide-eyed, fully engaged yet shielded from the more painful realities of betrayal. I reflected on the months leading to this moment. The meticulous recording of receipts, letters, voicemails, music box codes, and behavioral observations had culminated in a structure that could not be challenged. Each action had been deliberate, documenting evidence, planning controlled exposures, and ensuring legality at every turn. Every step had been designed to uphold justice while protecting Emily. By late January 2022, the legal processes were complete. Hidden transfers were accounted for, boutique receipts reconciled, and documentation archived. The subtle but firm ripple of accountability reached beyond our household. Financial institutions were informed, legal obligations fulfilled, and boundaries restored. I watched my wife quietly sorting through documents at the desk. Her movements were precise, careful, yet restrained. The aura of invulnerability she had relied upon had been replaced by a sober awareness. The meticulous unraveling of deception had left no gaps, no safe havens. Emily, innocently flipping the music box's key, smiled. "Daddy, it's peaceful now." And in that moment I realized that measured justice was not about retaliation. It was about restoring order, protecting trust, and ensuring that deceit could not flourish unchecked. Later that evening, I reviewed the final matrix of evidence once more: receipts, letters, coded music box sequences, and documented behavioral slips. Everything aligned perfectly. Each transaction, every subtle slip, every minor concealment had been accounted for. The map of deception was complete. The ethical path of exposure executed flawlessly. The city lights of Atlanta twinkled outside the window, distant and steady, a quiet reflection of the equilibrium restored within our home. I leaned back, listening to the faint echo of the music box, now a soft, soothing presence rather than a harbinger of discovery. Measured justice had been achieved, precise, lawful, and ethical. Emily's trust remained intact, her innocence preserved. The months of observation, patience, and strategic exposure had culminated in undeniable clarity. And in that quiet winter night, I understood fully: truth, patience, and ethical vigilance are the most powerful instruments of all. By early February 2022, Atlanta had settled into the quiet rhythm of winter. Snow was occasional now, frost lingering on the windows in the early mornings, the streets crisp and empty. The house, once heavy with tension, now breathed with clarity. Emily moved freely, her laughter echoing softly in the hallways, a tangible symbol that the storm of betrayal had passed. I often found myself in the study, the music box on the desk, its faint tune echoing gently through the quiet rooms. What had once been a coded instrument of revelation had transformed into a reminder: patience, observation, and ethical action are more powerful than impulsive confrontation. Looking back, the journey had been exacting. Receipts, letters, bank transfers, music box codes, all meticulously documented, cross-referenced, and verified. $2,800, March 15th. $1,200, April 9th. $2,000, April 28th. $3,200, May 14th. $450, April 2nd. Each number told a story. Each note aligned with the melody of truth. The web of concealment had been unraveled without compromising Emily's innocence or crossing ethical boundaries. Emily would often wind the music box and hum along, unaware of the layered significance of its tune. I watched her, feeling a profound sense of closure. My daughter's trust had been preserved, the family home and financial stability safeguarded. Every slip my wife had made, every controlled exposure, every calculated observation had contributed to a resolution that was both lawful and just. I reflected on the months of observation, sleepless nights, and subtle testing. Each step had been a lesson in patience, each micro-expression a data point, every accidental voicemail a confirmation of truth. And in the end, justice had been measured, ethical, and precise. Not vindictive, not cruel, just complete. The melody of the music box now played softly, its tune a quiet companion in my reflections. I realized the true power lay not in exposure alone, but in the careful orchestration of truth. My wife, though silent, now navigated our home differently, her previous confidence replaced by a quiet awareness that her manipulations had been seen, decoded, and ethically countered. I paused, listening to the echo of the notes, thinking of Emily, of the trust she had in me, and of the lessons we had all learned. The story of betrayal, observation, and resolution had reached its natural conclusion. The storm had passed, leaving clarity, restored trust, and moral balance. As I tucked Emily in one evening, she asked, "Daddy, will the music box always play?" I smiled softly. "Yes, Emily, it will always play, reminding us that truth, patience, and care guide the way. And no matter what happens, our trust and love will keep us steady." Later, in the quiet of the study, I reflected on the path we had traversed. The months of calculated patience had ensured ethical justice, preserved family bonds, and restored order. The music box's tune, once a coded signal of betrayal, now resonated as a symbol of vigilance, clarity, and measured resolution. And as I listened to its faint notes echo through the house, I whispered to myself, the words both a lesson and a closure. "You didn't lose me, you gave me away." The tune played on, soft but insistent, a reminder that life, truth, and trust continue, ethically, patiently, and inevitably.